Hey, Ed here from 10,000 Foot View, and I've got another Google Ads quick tip for you today. So in this session, I want to have a look at Google Ads recommendations, and I'm mostly going to be focusing on ones that you do not want to implement. So first off, recommendations are great. It's a great tool inside of Google Ads, and it should be part of your regular optimization routine because there are a lot of recommendations that do make sense to implement, and it can kind of alert you to tools and things that maybe you're not using that could benefit you. By the same token, a lot of recommendations that Google makes are way off base, just in terms of they don't make sense in context with your campaign goals, or they are just kind of generic things that are not going to benefit most advertisers, or at least some advertisers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those in this video. I will also add a link to an article I wrote about this that's a lot more comprehensive that I recommend you read through. But first and foremost, you know, spend some time to go through each recommendation and consider it carefully. Do not just leave things open. Um, And just before I jump into some of the recommendations I want to look at, just a reminder that any Google partner agency, they do need to maintain their client accounts in aggregate at 70% or more on the optimization score. You can achieve that by adding recommendations or accepting them. You can also achieve that by dismissing them. So you can see here, this account's at 100%, but it's actually only at 73% when you when you consider the accepted recommendations. But importantly, that 70%, it'll count even if they're dismissed. So just a note, if you are an agency, a Google partner, that you do need to do that to keep your credentials. Okay, so just let's jump in and look at a couple of these recommendations that we've dismissed in this account. So create a Performance Max campaign. Absolutely nothing wrong with Performance Max. We use it for a lot of our clients. In this case, it just doesn't make any sense because the amount of spend on search per campaign is really low and the number of conversions is really low. So, you're going to basically end up with a situation where, you're taking a $30 a day budget and splitting it in two to run PMAX. So, just doesn't make sense in this account. Improve your responsive search ads. Well, duh, of course, that's something we're always doing on an ongoing basis. When you open this up, invariably, what you're going to see is a bunch of recommended ad copies and the headlines and descriptions to beef up your ad. A lot of times that ad copy is really bad. It can often be for landing pages that are not related to the ads in question, and can also include things like phone numbers, which are not even allowed by Google anyway. Suffice to say, usually the recommendations are not valid. That said, there's no harm in looking at those and essentially dismissing each one as you go, because we do occasionally see a good headline recommendation or description recommendation from Google. Looking at this one here, bid more efficiently with maximized conversions. Usually these are dead wrong recommendations, and they don't consider the context and the goal for the campaign, which is odd because, of course, you typically select the goal for a campaign. So, always have a look at these and consider what your current bidding strategy is, but just accepting this blindly usually result in tanking your performance. Expand your reach with Google search partners. We, by default, typically do use Google search partners when we start with new campaigns, unless we have a very restricted budget. And then we'll monitor performance for a time. And if we determine that the search partner's performance is subpar and we don't need that inventory to hit our budget, which is probably pretty much all the time, then we will disable those. But nevertheless, Google will keep coming back and say, add this inventory. Likewise, they will do that with display inventory, display expansion, or whatever they're calling it this week. And more often than not, you don't want to be running, I'd say almost always, you don't want to be running display ads as a part of search, because you will have no control over how much budget is being distributed to which campaign type. You'll have very little control over creative in terms of display, and you'll have like no control over audiences. So it's just going to waste your ad spend. So don't do it. And then raise your budgets right here. Raise your budgets. Well, of course, why not raise your budgets? Well, usually the better answer to raise your budgets, if you're capped, is to actually lower your bids, unless you do want to scale up. Because lowering your bids will generally get you more clicks, and more clicks equals more conversion. So that's where you want to start, unless you happen to be trying to scale, in which case you're probably going to be way ahead of this notification anyway. So, that's just a few examples very quickly of recommendations we rarely apply. I think like the responsive ads ones, it's always worth looking at the recommendations. But I'm going to go into this in much more depth in the article that I'll link here. And there are lots of recommendations that you really should look at and apply. And like one great example of that is assets, meaning things like site links and callouts, call extensions. I mean, call extensions aren't for every account, but they are for a lot. So those are things often that when Google Prodigy you should be doing. So yeah, that's kind of it for recommendations you should avoid. Importantly, you really just need to consider each one carefully and what the impact to your account may be. The other last point on this is auto apply, which I'm pointing at here. Please do not ever turn on auto apply recommendations, even if the recommendation happens to be a good one and it gets auto applied. You may see strange things in that campaign that have resulted from that, and you won't be aware of why it happened. And then you're going to have to like be Sherlock Holmes and go try and figure out like, why did all of a sudden spending increase, or how come my ad looks like that? So the recommendations, you can go through and manually very quickly as part of your optimization, accept them, dismiss them, implement them another way. You do not need auto apply, and it's really just a bad idea. Anyway, hopefully that will help boost your performance and make recommendations a little more clear. And that's it for today. I will see you next time.